From the world of politics to the world of business, this is Balance of Power. Live from Washington, D.C.
From Bloomberg's Washington, D.C. studios to our TV and radio audiences worldwide, welcome to Balance of Power. I'm Kaylee Lyons. Just days away from a government funding deadline, and there's still no text for a stopgap spending legislation. We'll have the latest from Capitol Hill this hour. Plus, we'll bring you my conversation with Democratic Senator Amy Klobuchar of Minnesota, who weighs in on the future of antitrust regulation and artificial intelligence. And as Israeli officials signal they are closer to a ceasefire agreement with Hamas in Gaza than at any point in the last year, we'll be joined by former State Department official Morgan Ortagus. And also joining me for the hour is Bloomberg's Michael Shepard. Mike, thanks for being here on the Tuesday edition. It's 5 p.m. Eastern time on Tuesday with a midnight Friday deadline, and still no text to be seen.
Where is it? That is the question very much on all of our minds, and especially on the minds of lawmakers who might have some holiday plans in mind, but also be worried about what signal this could be sending for next year.
Yeah, considering there's a lot on their to-do list next year, and they can't seem to check this final item off their to-do list for this year. We did hear from the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, about what exactly is going on earlier today. He said this.
I'm not going to get into much more detail because it's almost done, but we do expect text today, and we are going to try. Let me answer your question in advance. I believe in the 72-hour rule. I've said that to all the House Republicans this morning. I believe we ought to try to pass this on a rule to go through regular process. We're committed to all of that. We're going to take care of these obligations and get this done.
Joining us now for a closer look is Bloomberg tax Congress reporter Zach Cohen, here with us in our Washington, D.C. studio. So, Zach, the Speaker wants to stick to procedure here. The problem is, even if we do get this text tonight, which is an if, 72 hours from now is Friday evening. You're not leaving the Senate much wiggle room.
Right. Or the White House, for that matter. It still has to get signed into law by President Biden. And so you're really leaving very little time for lawmakers, not just to read this bill, but also to vote on it. We have to almost think of this bill not just as a continuing resolution at this point that would continue current government funding until March 14th, we're hearing, and set up another deadline. But it's almost an even bigger disaster aid package, $100 billion for areas that have been hard hit by storms and flooding in the last couple of years, $10 billion for farmers as the farm bill has been stalled in partisan bickering between the House and the Senate. And so there's a lot on the line here as lawmakers are trying to get a suite of issues done before they leave for the Christmas recess and before Democrats lose control of the Senate and the White House.
Zach, looking ahead, we have another spending deadline already looming, and that is March 14th. That is what this bill would tee up. That doesn't leave them a lot of time for the next, even bigger, perhaps, deadline that they would face next year. That is the end of April, and that is the 100-day mark for Donald Trump's next term. So what room does that leave them in terms of being able to negotiate all of the things that he wants done on border, on taxes, and on everything else when you have to throw in yet another spending bill and the debt limit, too?
Yeah, and certainly confirming an entire cabinet as well needs to happen in the first couple of days. And we could see some of those happen on January 20th after Donald Trump is sworn in for a second term. But you're absolutely right. It'll be kind of a pileup of issues that the Trump administration and new unified Republican control of Congress will need to tackle. I think it's part of the reason why they're talking about a budget reconciliation bill that tackles things like border security and energy and leaves a tax bill for later in the year when they can work out some of those thornier issues, such as how to score it and how to offset it. And so they certainly have their hands full, but Republicans have clearly made the calculation at this juncture. They would rather have unified control of the spending process, at least to finish out fiscal 25, while also dealing with all these other issues.
So realistically, if it's a second reconciliation package for tax, when does that come? Are we really looking at like summer, late in the year here?
I think we have to remember that the deadline to renew the individual provisions of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, that 2017 Trump tax cut, is not until the end of 2025. And there's nothing that Congress loves more than a deadline. And so we could see something happen as late as Christmas of next year to see the renewal of that tax package. I think that's some of the consideration for leadership that's trying to figure out how to budget out their year. They'll have to figure out how to raise or suspend the debt ceiling sometime probably in the first half of the year, depending on how many receipts receipts come in. And so it could be some time before we see the specifics of an eventual tax package, even if it's mostly just an extension of current law. There's obviously a number of provisions that President-elect Trump is hoping to get in, including no tax on tips or Social Security benefits. But working all of those out is not going to happen overnight. And the budget reconciliation process that allows them to bypass Democrats entirely in the Senate will take a number of steps and a lot of late nights in order to get done.
Zach Cohen of Bloomberg Tax, thank you. Health and Human Services Secretary Pick RFK Jr. continued his meetings with Republican senators on Capitol Hill today. This as Netflix CEO Ted Sarandos reportedly meets with Donald Trump. Joining us now is Bloomberg's Wendy Benjaminson. Wendy, we have seen quite a bit of movement, not only on Capitol Hill in terms of meetings, but also at Mar-a-Lago. And I wanted to talk about that because we have, in a way, seen this movie before. Absolutely. With Trump as president-elect receiving so many executives who want to hear from him and to be heard, too. Right. What are we to make of this parade of CEOs? Well,
I think one of the things we can make of it, Mike, is that they have learned their lesson from the first Trump term. You know, don't kiss the ring, say things that you're scared about Donald Trump, and bad things can happen to you and your company. This time, they are all, whether they agree with him politically or not, are heading down there trying to make the best deals they can. Trump is a very transactional president, as we know, and he will be trying to, they will all be trying to secure the best deals they can, the most favor they can before January 20th. And meanwhile, his nominees are on the Hill, like RFK Jr., on this supposed charm offensive, whereas today I think he only met with senators who were already inclined to confirm his nomination. As the week goes on, those meetings are going to get tougher and tougher, and we'll have to see how that goes for him.
There is something else I want to ask you about, Wendy, but we should hear yesterday how President-elect Trump himself characterized the difference in the way executives are approaching him this time compared to 2016. This was what Trump had to say.
I did have dinner with Tim Cook. I had dinner with sort of almost all of them, and the rest are coming. One of the big differences between the first term, everybody was fighting me. In this term, everybody wants to be my friend. I don't know. My personality changed or something. It's a big difference. The big difference is that the first time everybody was fighting me on all fronts.
So it's basically what you were speaking to, Wendy. Right. It's very different in nature. So while he may be making more friends down in Mar-a-Lago, I want to ask you about someone or an institution he may not be feeling so friendly towards. As we learned today, he is suing Ann Selzer, famed pollster from Iowa, and the Des Moines Register, as well as their newspaper owner, Gannett, over that Iowa poll that published just before the election that showed Kamala Harris ahead of him in a state that no one had previously expected she stood a chance in.
Right.
Is this lawsuit likely to go anywhere, considering he won the election? So I do wonder what the damage is
here.
I'm
no lawyer, but I will say that one must show damages in an election, and also malice when you're going after journalists. She published, and I will say this from the person who ran Bloomberg's polling all through the election, you publish the numbers you get.
Yeah.
Without fear or favor, you publish the numbers you get. And the numbers she got in her poll, which has been going on for years, showed that Kamala Harris had a late surge, and at least from the people who answered the phone in Iowa, were inclined to go with her. However, then Election Day happened, and Trump won it by double digits. So what possible damages can he show from the Ann Selzer poll? I mean, if anything, it seemed to have spurred his supporters to get out and vote on Election Day. So instead of staying home and just assuming he would win. So I have no idea. But this does seem to be part of a pattern. ABC News and George Stephanopoulos just settled with him over a legally inaccurate description that Stephanopoulos made about the E. Jean Carroll sexual abuse case. So they settled for $15 million and had to apologize. Trump is now suing Ann Selzer, and there are many other lawsuits that he is planning or threatening to plan. And I think, in the first term, he just complained about the media, and he called us fake news, and they didn't cooperate when we were all trying to report and things like that. This time, I think we're going to have to watch for lawsuits, loss of privileges at the White House. Who knows? But the war on the media is on.
All right. Bloomberg's Wendy Benjaminson, thank you so much. Now, another story we're following, Israeli officials say a ceasefire in Gaza is a more realistic prospect now than at any time in the past year. A working group from Israel is in Doha this week to reestablish relations with mediators in the event of a breakthrough in negotiations with Hamas, according to officials. As for the timing, President-elect Donald Trump is pushing to have a deal to release the hostages being held by Hamas before his second term begins, as he made clear in his news conference at Mar-a-Lago yesterday.
I'll be very available on January 20th, and we'll see. As you know, I gave warning that if these hostages aren't back home by that date, all hell's going to break out, and very strong.
Coming up, we'll take a closer look at what's next for the Middle East with Morgan Ortagus. She is founder of Polaris National Security and former State Department spokesperson. And she's next on Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio.
We're trying to help very strongly in getting the hostages back, as you know, with Israel and the Middle East. We're working very much on that. We're trying to get the war stopped, that horrible war that's going on in Ukraine, Russia, Ukraine. We're going to, we've got a little progress.
President-elect Donald Trump talking geopolitics yesterday during a news conference at Mar-a-Lago. And joining us now to further that conversation here on Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio is Morgan Ortagus. She's founder of Polaris National Security, former State Department spokesperson, and also has spent years working across multiple administrations when it comes to issues of the Middle East. Morgan, thanks for being here in our Washington, D.C. studio. If we could just begin with the news we have in hand today, which is that Israeli officials are signaling they are much closer to a ceasefire deal with Hamas in Gaza than they have been. What is your degree of confidence this is something that can actually happen before President Biden leaves the Oval Office and Donald Trump takes it?
I don't want to jinx it, but I do think that we're in a much better place now. And one of the reasons is you, in essence, have two different presidents working on this. And this isn't just a president-elect with Trump. This is a former president who has a team, who has a record in the Middle East. Remember that Trump's 2020 record in the Middle East was taking out Qasem Soleimani, aggressive maximum economic pressure campaign against Iran, which you guys reported about extensively. So I think, and it very much seems to be with the blessing of both administrations. You have Jake Sullivan and Brett McGurk working on this, but there has also been all the reports of Steve Witkoff, who is President Trump's new Middle East envoy, Mike Waltz working closely behind the scenes as well. So I think all of these leaders in the Middle East, they know the former president, now the president-elect, they know his team. So it's kind of a unique moment in history where you have two presidents and their teams working on the ceasefire at the same time. So if we're going to get it, I think it should happen soon. President Trump has made it clear. He's issued several threats to Hamas now that he needs to have the American hostages home before January 20th.
Morgan, I wanted to turn the clock back a little bit to your time in the administration. You were there when then President Trump helped forge the Abraham Accords. Yeah. We are at a very different place in history right now. He has a very different starting point as he prepares to take office. Where does he take Middle East policy in the book from here, with Syria, with Israel, with Iran, with all of this?
So one of the positive things is that the Abraham Accords held, right? And that was something since October 7th. That was a question for all of us. You saw initially the Biden team had a reluctance to embrace the Abraham Accords, and then they fully embraced them. They named an Abraham Accords envoy. It was a rare moment of bipartisan consensus on an issue in the Middle East, because there's been clear divergence between the two parties on Iran. I think your question's fascinating. So there's obviously the mess that has to be dealt with in Syria. In many ways, this is a repeat of what Trump had to deal with in 2018. Remember, there was a physical caliphate of ISIS in Iraq and Syria when Trump took office. President Obama really started to unleash the military towards the end of his presidency, once they had that physical caliphate. And after he sort of made that, gaffe about calling ISIS the JV squad, Trump then really took on ISIS and destroyed that physical caliphate. Now we're in a place where ISIS can stop Taylor Swift concerts in Europe. They're threats, right? ISIS-K, ISIS-Khorasan, the affiliate in Afghanistan, has a foothold in every province. And so I think everybody is incredibly concerned about what could emanate from Syria. With HTS, this is, of course, the rebel group that has taken control in Syria. I would caution the Biden administration not to lift sanctions. They are a designated terror group in the United States. I think it should be a wait-and-see approach, a trust but verify. In my opinion, that should be a carrot that the Trump administration should be able to wield in Syria. The big question, really, I think where Trump's going to go in Israel. Where Trump's going to go in Saudi Arabia. The big question is where he goes on Iran. Clearly, he got out of the JCPOA. He was very critical of the Iran nuclear deal. He called it one of the worst deals ever negotiated. Yeah. He, of course, took out Qasem Soleimani and had that maximum economic pressure campaign. The difference is now is that sanctions have not been enforced over the past 4 years. Iran was enriched. We had October 7th. We had the ballistic missile attacks from Iran emanating to the physical territory of Israel. I mean, I could go through the list. I don't have enough time. Your producers will cut me off. But really importantly is the Iran deal, the major provisions of it are sunsetting. It's getting ready to expire. So, yes, there are snapback sanction options available to the E3, to France, Germany, and the UK. There's snapback sanctions that could happen at the UN. That may be something that Elise Stefanik wants to take on. But, when you talk about, the whole debate that we've had over a decade in Washington of getting into the JCPOA, getting out of the JCPOA, trying to get back into the JCPOA, that debate in many ways is largely, going to be somewhat dead in the Trump administration because of the deal, the major parts of the deal sunsetting and expiring.
I'd like to ask you about another deal Trump is very clear he wants to pursue, and that is one to end the war between Russia and Ukraine. We heard more about this from him just yesterday, and we learned today that Ukraine is reportedly responsible for the assassination of a high-ranking Russian general in Moscow. And I wonder if you see this as a mechanism for that deal to get closer, or if it's only going to bring it farther away.
Well, all wars end virtually in the same way, which is typically it's a negotiated settlement that no one likes. Every once in a while you have embarrassing and disastrous moments like we had in August of 21 when we lost 13 Americans on our way out of Afghanistan. But for the most part, it tends to be negotiated settlements. Some people like them, some people don't. And everybody, whenever you come to the end of a war, which Zelensky has signaled for quite some time now that he understands that that's where the Ukrainians need to go, everyone's looking for leverage. Whenever they get near the end. Everyone's trying to improve their bargaining position. So I don't think that President Trump or General Keith Kellogg, who he's appointed to be sort of an envoy to this conflict, I don't think they're going to show all of their cards now. I think that President Trump, in that press conference that you showed earlier, took a tactic that I've seen him take for many years, which is he says nice things about the leaders, in public, but then in private, it's a much different tone. It's a much tougher negotiation. So ultimately, do I know exactly how Trump will negotiate the end of the war? I don't know that anybody knows. But I think that I expect both parties to try and do everything they can to have as much leverage as possible at that negotiating table.
Morgan Ortagus, founder of Polaris National Security and former State Department spokesperson, thank you for joining us.
Thanks.
Coming up, a closer look at the numbers behind Congress's push to approve disaster relief funding with Bloomberg's Tyler Kendall next on Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio. This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio. House Speaker Mike Johnson says the spending bill to avert a government shutdown will also include disaster relief funding to help millions of Americans. Bloomberg's Tyler Kendall has all the details.
Yeah, hey, Mike. Disaster relief has become a sticking point in the bipartisan negotiations as we wait for the finalized text of this continuing resolution to get out the door. Lawmakers say they've agreed to deliver more than $100 billion in emergency aid. Money will go to communities impacted by the hurricanes that hit the U.S. this fall. We saw big economic impacts in the aftermath. For example, retail sales data today for November beat expectations after October's reading lost steam due to consumer disruption from these storms. Earlier, House Speaker Mike Johnson called this funding necessary to help out Americans who are still hurting.
A couple of intervening things have occurred. We had as we say, as we describe them, acts of God. We had these massive hurricanes, as you know, in the late fall, Helene and Milton and other disasters. We have to make sure that the Americans that were devastated by these hurricanes get the relief they need. So we are adding to this a disaster relief package, and that's critically important.
President Biden had requested this emergency funding back in October. That was partly because the Federal Emergency Management Agency, known as FEMA, at the time said it already spent about half of its $20 billion in allocated funding just for fiscal year 2025 alone. That's supposed to last through September 30th of next year. Now, experts warned back then that Washington needs to break this cycle. Whether or not this bill alone will do that if it's passed remains to be seen.
I went through it when I was FEMA administrator in 2017 to 19. I had to ask Congress 3 times for more funding into the disaster relief fund. And eventually it was approved. But how do we get out of this cycle? And right now, I believe it's not just the funding, but how do we get out of this response cycle? And where do we start to incentivize communities to do the right things, such as proper land use planning, implementing the stronger building codes that the ICC recommends?
Now, it's not just FEMA who says that they need this money for federal emergency response. The Small Business Administration has become absolutely critical in how the federal government responds in times of need. The SBA provides low-interest loans to help businesses and individuals, in some cases up to $2 million to rebuild after disaster. Kaylee and Mike, the SBA says it's out of funding for its loan program until this spending bill can get approved.
Well, I guess it raises the question, Tyler, of how it's out of funding already. How quickly do they go through it?
Right, exactly. So FEMA, for example, went through its fiscal year 2024 fund so quickly that Congress had to open its 2025 fund early so that it can essentially work through this backlog of cases. I mentioned that $20 billion number allocated for fiscal year 2025. FEMA says $8 billion of that didn't go to anything related to fiscal year 2025, but actually to Western states dealing with those deadly wildfires from earlier this year. So, Mike and Kaylee, it's pretty easy to see that this year's bucket is going to be used up pretty quickly since FEMA's coordinating a federal response for 6 states across the Southeast that have been approved for federal assistance to help in the aftermath of Hurricanes Milton and Helene.
All right, Bloomberg's Tyler Kendall, great reporting. Thank you so much. And Mike, of course, at this hour, almost 5:30 p.m. on the East Coast, we still don't have the text of this deal that supposedly includes this disaster relief.
No, and what's incredible in talking to Zach Cohen and hearing from Tyler is just how structural this problem is.
Yeah.
When you go to the micro level on disaster funding and then the macro level on just funding the government, every cycle it seems to be the same. Lather, rinse, repeat.
Yep, the same song and dance all over again. Well, still ahead, we'll bring you my conversation with Democratic Senator Amy Klobuchar of Minnesota. Her thoughts on antitrust regulation and artificial intelligence. That's next on Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio. Welcome back to Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio. Earlier today, I spoke with Democratic Senator Amy Klobuchar of Minnesota, who held a Judiciary Subcommittee hearing this afternoon focused on continuing a bipartisan path forward for antitrust enforcement and reform. And I began by asking her what that bipartisan path will look like when her party becomes the minority in January.
I think what you've seen in this area of antitrust, you've seen some broad bipartisan agreement on a number of these cases, right? For instance, the Google case started under the Trump administration, the first Trump administration, as did the Facebook case that was at the FTC. Google was at the Justice Department. Then it proceeded through the Biden administration. Biden administration also brought some major cases, for instance, against Ticketmaster and other companies. And so you've seen a more aggressive antitrust enforcement over the last few years. Now you have new appointees going in place, and at least one of them I have heard the belief is over at the Justice Department with some former Democratic antitrust enforcers that she knows what she's doing. I'm looking forward to meeting with her, Gail Slater. And I'm hoping that we will continue those cases. I love competition.
Okay.
I like capitalism. That's why I'm for antitrust enforcement.
Well, you've mentioned Gail Slater. What about Andrew Ferguson? Do you think he loves the issue of competition in the same way that you do? Do you trust that the FTC will be in good hands under his leadership?
You know, I am looking forward to meeting with him. Interestingly enough, we do not confirm that position because he was already on the commission. Yeah. There is a new member that is being appointed on the Republican side. I'll note that he wrote a piece on the breakup of Ticketmaster in which he favored that. So I just think with antitrust, because at its core, it is about competition, and it's been laggard for many decades. And as a result, we're seeing more and more consolidation. It isn't that big companies are bad. It's that sometimes when you have no competition, then you start getting less innovation, more high prices, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm actually really excited about this. Senator Lee and I are doing this together, this hearing. Mm-hmm. Senator Grassley and I have passed our bill together, and I think you're going to continue to see interest in tech. In fact, Senator Cruz and I did a joint interview this morning, and a bill that we have gotten through the Senate on taking online porn off the internet. Different than antitrust. However, you're just going to continue to see bipartisan work on tech.
Well, I'm glad that you have brought up the Take It Down Act, which you co-sponsored with Senator Cruz. Is that trying to tackle symptoms of an underlying disease rather than the disease itself? And the disease I'm referring to here is unregulated artificial intelligence.
Thanks. I really would like to put in some rules of the road on AI. And this bill is actually broader than just AI pornographic pictures. It's actually also real pictures as well as AI-created ones. We're now seeing 1 in 12 Americans saying that they have been a victim or know someone that's a victim of this. We've had 20 suicides in 1 year of young kids. 20 suicides because someone, a girlfriend, boyfriend, someone they knew, put up their photo. They were embarrassed that their friends and their family would know, and they killed themselves. These are FBI statistics. So Senator Cruz and I came together. The bill does 2 things. One, make it clearly a crime to use pornographic imagery of someone else, whether it's AI created or real. And then number 2, that the platforms have to take it down. That's why it's called the Take It Down Act. They take down other violations of intellectual property, and the fact that people can be abused in this way to the point of committing suicide. And in one case that I know of, Senator Cruz's case, he actually had to call Snapchat to get the image down after months of this victim from his state dealing with it. That's just wrong.
Senator, I'd like to ask you about another one of your colleagues, your fellow Democrat. Senator Elizabeth Warren of Massachusetts wrote a letter, we understand, to President-elect Donald Trump asking for firm conflict of interest rules to be put into place related to Elon Musk, who, of course, has been tapped to co-lead this new Department of Government Efficiency. Have you had any conversations with Senator Warren about that, or at the very least, do you share in that sentiment?
Now, I haven't seen this letter, but I will say that I believe that we need conflict of interest rules in place for people who are making major decisions in the government. That is what our people have done voluntarily for years now. And you have a number of very wealthy people going into the Trump administration. There's been wealthy people as well under Democratic administrations, but you have a number of them coming in, and we need the conflict rules enforced. We need to know that the decisions they are making are not for their own interests, but for the interests of the American people. And I would hope that President-elect Trump agrees.
Finally, President-elect Trump yesterday met with the CEO of TikTok, Shou Chew, at Mar-a-Lago after saying in a news conference, Senator, that he has a warm spot in his heart for TikTok when asked if he would like to see the ban go through or will try to stop it. Given some of the issues we have already discussed around technology in particular and what is propagated on these platforms, what is your view about whether that ban should be enforced come January?
Of course, this came out of Congress with strong bipartisan support, and there are 2 avenues here. One is that they can follow the law and divest and find a buyer for the company. And the second is that they still are appealing to the Supreme Court. So my view has been that we should have rules of the road in place, by the way, for all platforms. I have been way out there, as I think you know, in terms of getting not just pornography off the internet, but other other very, very difficult things that are on there right now, and that we should have a better policing of that, and people should have the right to protect their own intellectual properties, and also that we should have antitrust enforcement. You just can't have, say, Google with a 90% market share on the search engine and not have any competition, and then allow them to self-preference, as we see with Amazon and other companies, their own products at the top. That's why the NFIB, which is not a liberal organization, the National Federation of Independent Businesses, is strongly supporting the bill that I have with Senator Grassley, which simply puts some rules in the road in place for competition on the internet.
You can find that full conversation with Democratic Senator Amy Klobuchar of Minnesota online or on the terminal. And Mike Shepard, it does go back to antitrust, what I was just discussing about with her about TikTok, because TikTok's options are be banned in the U.S. or divest. And if they're going to do that, someone has to buy it. And what big tech company, potentially, who would be interested in TikTok can clear all the regulatory hurdles that, as she was talking about, are kind of a bipartisan thing when it comes to the approach to competition in tech specifically?
Well, that's right. And it's interesting that you bring up big tech, because Morgan Stanley analysts earlier this week singled out Amazon as a potential buyer. And yet Amazon faces some headline risk on competition itself in other areas unrelated to, say, social media. But by acquiring a platform like TikTok, which is now dabbling in the retail space, that could create a conflict, too. And then who does have the deep pockets? Would it be an investment fund, perhaps outside the U.S.? That could create the same kind of issues that we see with ownership by a Chinese entity.
Yeah, it's really hard to see how any of this gets sorted by January 19th, unless the Supreme Court ultimately does as TikTok has asked and step in to put a pause on it.
Right, absolutely.
Well, we're going to have to continue to keep track of this one for sure.
Definitely. We'll be back again to talk about it. Coming up, lawmakers say they are close to a government funding deal ahead of Friday's deadline. But there is still no text in hand, and the clock is ticking. Our political panel weighs in next on Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio.
We're sort of left in the dark. It has not been a member-driven process. It's been a process driven by leadership. And unfortunately, we're kind of just waiting to see what happens. We shouldn't have to find out what's going on by searching Twitter. That's the bottom line. I think it's frustrating to a lot of members that we're also seeing this negotiation with the Democrats when we're in the majority, and we should be talking among ourselves and figuring this out.
Republican Congresswoman Nicole Maliotakis of New York on the early edition of Balance of Power today, sharing her frustrations on how House leadership has handled the looming government funding deadline. We still haven't seen the text of a stopgap deal. So joining us now for more here on Bloomberg TV and radio, Kristen Hahn, Rock Solutions partner and Democratic strategist, alongside Lisa Camusa-Miller, host of the Friday Reporter podcast and Republican strategist. They are our political panel this evening. Welcome to you both. We are obviously dealing with a midnight Friday deadline here, and still we can't seem to get this thing out into the public for consumption. Lisa, not only is this maybe problematic for a technical shutdown this weekend, though most people think that will be avoided, but this can't be a good sign for what's to come in the 119th Congress.
Oh, no, I don't think it's any surprise to anybody that this is going to be a rocky road for the next 2 years. And I think a lot of it has to do, even though the Congresswoman said that the Republicans have the majority, it's such a slim majority, and it's a really fractured majority, right? There's not everybody sees eye to eye on this. So my suspicion is that the Speaker has a strategy behind this. And if he offered the text this early out, it would be really hard to get people to coalesce around it. And so it feels to me like this is a strategy inside the leadership to try to get to a place where they can get this legislation out and passed and done, because nothing says get done with legislation like the threat of not seeing Christmas with your families.
Kristen, where does this leave Democrats? They're obviously going to have to step in at certain points, possibly to help Mike Johnson on key things, like some of this must-pass spending legislation, like the one that we're struggling to get over the line this week. It's going to get even harder next year. What role are they going to play more than just spoiler?
Yeah, I mean, I think it will. I mean, the Democrats actually helped him with his speakership. Well, didn't rule because it was rule. But, I think that this Congress, you've got a lot of issues with the CR, a lot of things that are bubbling under the surface, even when you look at the health care provisions. I mean, a lot of those are just, you're talking about a Christmas tree. And I think putting it out there, I mean, who knows whether things will be stripped. And we just get to a bare bones CR. There are some even issues where the unions would have to renegotiate all of their contracts, which, they're not itching to do. So there are a lot of things happening next year with a one-seat majority until they elect more members or appoint new members. The Democrats are going to be, at the table working with the Republican leadership. And I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. When you've got Democratic leadership willing to say, OK, let's talk about this, because I think you have got a fractured caucus. If you have a one-seat majority, it's really difficult to pass anything.
Well, I want to talk about some of the leaders within the Democratic caucus, not just actual leadership, but those who say will have an outsized role by being ranking members on committees. Interesting to see in the Oversight Committee, AOC trying to take hold of this generational shift we have been seeing and the kind of bucking of seniority the Democrats seem to be embracing to take the ranking member title, and instead 74-year-old Jerry Connolly gets it. Kristen, you're plugged into House Dems. What was with this?
I think there's a little bit of generational, but there's also how members of the caucus, the chairman or the ranking members in this case, have actually worked with members across the Democratic caucus. You've got the CBC, the CHC, the Blue Dogs, the New Dems. I think that he had done a really good job of that. And what do we want, the rest of the nation to be? It's a very vocal committee. It's a very loud committee. We wanted, I think that the leadership was in tune with changes. You have Pallone maintaining the gavel, or not the gavel, but the ranking membership at Energy and Commerce. But you've got a lot of shifting with Angie Craig taking over for the first time. A Midwesterner is taking over as ranking member on the Ag Committee, and the first time a woman has had the gavel, or the ranking membership of the Ag Committee. I'm getting ahead of myself. So I think
Kristen's trying to take back the majority at the table right now.
Majority right now on balance of power, y'all. No, but I think there's been a lot of shifts within the Democratic Party. I feel good about it. I think most of my colleagues feel good about it.
Yeah. Lisa, we did get a sense from Congresswoman Ortagus about the frustration level that some members of her caucus are feeling right now with Mike Johnson. Talk about that a little bit, and how will that play out this week and maybe into the beginning of the year as the new Congress is seated?
I think some of it has to do with the way that the Congress is operating right now. I think some of it also, too, is a frustration that you typically do hear from those who aren't in leadership. Leadership is keeping this from us. Having worked in the Speaker's office, I remember these sort of complaints coming out of the conference. It is a little bit of a frustration, but it's also a time when there is a lot of moving parts. And if you were to offer that language ahead of time, that far in advance, it just allows for more fractures to happen. So to me, like I said earlier, it feels as if while there will be those who will, this is going to be so fractured beyond the point of just Republicans and Democrats. There are so many layers. Kristen mentioned a few on the Democrat side. There's as many, if not more, on the Republican side. It's going to be a constant moving and shaking. And unfortunately, it really sort of lies at the foot of the Speaker in order to get this over the line.
So if everything is going to be hard, which it seems like is the suggestion here, why try to do multiple hard things, like, say, one reconciliation package on border and energy and then another on taxes? Why not try to get one really hard thing over the finish line all at once as one battle?
Oh, I wish if I had the answer to that, we'd all be sitting somewhere else much warmer with cocktails. But I think that the one thing I'd say is that probably because that is the strategy they see that will be the one that will be the most successful. You and I, and we all are old enough to remember when we used to do comprehensive things here in Washington, D.C. That doesn't happen anymore. So the more we laid in, the more we add on, the more we put all the ornaments on the Christmas tree, the more difficult this is going to become. And so to me, I really do think that there is a broader strategy behind the scenes. I think that they've got a lot of smart people in leadership that are looking at how they're going to be successful. And this is really a test, and this is really sort of the best view we have into what next year and the following is going to look like.
Thank you. Coming up, Kristen Hahn and Lisa Camuso Miller are staying with us as RFK Jr. continues his meetings on Capitol Hill. We'll take a closer look on Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio.
Okay with an HHS secretary who has linked vaccine use to childhood autism?
Well, I think all of us are committed to making sure that all these nominees get a fair process. And he'll have an opportunity through the course of his meetings to answer those questions and in front of the committee of jurisdiction.
That was incoming Senate Majority Leader South Dakota's John Thune answering a question about RFK Jr., who is facing a potentially tough confirmation battle. Back with us is this evening's political panel, Kristen Hahn and Lisa Camuso-Miller. Lisa, I want to put it back to you because we are seeing one of President-elect Donald Trump's nominees, yet another one really running the gauntlet on Capitol Hill right now, having to do a lot of meetings with senators to just get enough support to perhaps win confirmation. We saw Pete Hegseth go through these motions last week, and even then it's not certain for either RFK Jr. or Pete Hegseth. What will it take to get him over the line? Is he there yet? And who do we see as potentially defecting?
Well, I don't think anything is obviously decided, and this is still a long run out and to see how it all goes. But the one thing is that, the Senate really is very deliberative in the way that they work, and they do count on the way historically these processes have unfolded. And so I think what you heard from the future majority leader is that that's precisely how they're going to process and they're going to work through. So the fact that he's on Capitol Hill doing the due diligence, it seems to me there will not be any other early exits from the
So no one's going to pull
nominations.
Mm-hmm.
No, I don't think so. They're all going to run the course, and they're all going to do, because now I think we've got plenty of nominees in place that feel as if they can make that happen. And they think that the White House is giving them the future White House, is giving them the cover that they need in order to transition, in order to make that happen.
Well, when we consider two of these nominees, RFK Jr., but also Tulsi Gabbard, Kristen, we are talking about former Democrats here. So even if they lose Republican votes, could you see any scenario in which any of these individuals may pick up a Democratic vote or two?
Tulsi Gabbard lost us a long time ago. I don't know about
so that's
that.
A no.
I don't think so in the Senate. You've maybe got some members of the House, but that's not their responsibility. I think you've got a lot of people with questionable decision-making, questionable backgrounds, and they're going to have to go through the process. And when the senators keep saying, let's bring them through the process, and that's a talking point right now, which I get, but it can be a pretty painful process. So if they're willing to do it, and, these will be broadcast and people will see, who these people are, what they bring to the table, and whether they can really do this, effectively, we'll see it played out.
Lisa, did Donald Trump offer any guardrails yesterday in his comments on RFK Jr. when he said the polio vaccine is safe and that he also doesn't think that RFK Jr. will be as radical as people think? Does that offer any sort of comfort to senators, or is it also a warning perhaps to some in the Senate not to derail too many of his nominees?
This will come as a surprise to those of you who've been on the panel with me before, but I actually have been very impressed with the way that the elected president has been very guarded and very thoughtful about the words that he's using. And I thought that yesterday was really a good signal to all of us that he is also mindful of what the narrative is around this nominee. And I think that alone is very interesting to me, because it does seem to me like if the Senate is going to be mindful of the way that the electorate had voiced their opinion when it came to the voting, then they'll notice that it's not necessarily about people's background and the things that they've said, but perhaps about the opportunity that it presents for future and for change that I think that we actually saw in the polls that people really do want more than anything else. So, yes, I think the president offered some guidance and some comfort to those of us who know that the vaccines, many of vaccines, have been life-changing, and even for some that are in the Senate, polio vaccine really was one that is going to be a non-starter if it comes down to that.
Yeah, referring to the outgoing majority leader, Mitch McConnell. I do wonder, Kristen, in our final minute here, if you kind of share the same view as Lisa, that we're seeing a more restrained or at least considerate of his language President-elect Donald Trump right now.
I was watching his press conference yesterday at Mar-a-Lago, and I thought he sounds more normal. And then I had to bring myself back down to earth and realize how low that bar is. I mean, these people have said dangerous things. If we all of a sudden parents don't think that their kids need to be vaccinated before going to school, it could be very, very dangerous. So I have to reorient myself. And yes, do I want our president to be sane and say sane things? And I say that in all sincerity, really. I mean, the day after the election, I was very concerned, still am. But yes, am I encouraged by the little bit of sanity that I've seen him bring to the table? But, you know, these people are in big positions, and I would hope that the senators would take their responsibility seriously and ask them the right questions.
Well, certainly a lot of questions are being asked on the Hill of these individuals this week. Kristen Hahn and Lisa Camusa-Miller, a political panel this evening. Thank you very much for joining me. And, of course, we are expecting, and Mike as well, thank you for joining me today and yesterday. It's been great to have you here on Balance of Power as we've worked through what's been a really busy week so far, considering we're dealing with the last week of the legislative year here of the 118th Congress.
Maybe we'll see that text by tomorrow morning, Kaylee. What do you think?
I don't know. I was kind of hoping it would come by the end of the show, but it doesn't seem we will be so lucky. So everybody's going to have to stay tuned tomorrow to find out what's in this thing. And, of course, you'll have coverage of that in the Washington Edition newsletter, on the Terminal, and online, and right here on Balance of Power. So we'll see you then on Bloomberg TV and radio.